I feel like it's not talked about that they're literally banking on the fact that they can't go get these traditional loans because of structural racism.
Do you still love me or not?
Hi, welcome to Frankly Loverly, also known as Frankly K. This is my Frankly Financial, where today we're going to have a quick topic. Today actually is going to be really quick. I just wanted to touch on private equity, the new hot button in that term, private equity firms, and basically everyone hates them. I can't blame them. It's not something that to hate or to love, but what I'm saying is I understand the hate. Private equity firms are exactly what they sound like. It's a private firm that deals in the trading of equity, aka capital, aka money, and resources. And by resources, I mean management talents, operational talents, probably logistical abilities, warehousing is part of logistics, stuff like that. Maybe it's like how to move the product. They'll take care of all of those kinds of things. And that's why we see a lot of small brands or independently owned brands by people of color. They often get bought by, I feel like they get targeted by private equity places because of the fact that they know that they don't have maybe the access to other kinds of lending because of institutionalized racism. Basically, you get a lot of different hurdles as into who actually gets the funding traditionally, as in maybe bank financing, SBA loans, stuff like that. That's when private equity comes in because they say, hey, we'll give you some money in change for 5% stake. I referenced this before, like Shark Tank. They're a venture capital place on that kind of private, but they're private equity. Venture capital is private equity for the most part because it's individuals and it's like, or a collection of individuals or a collection of things like a pensions fund that will come into play and help with where the money's coming from for this. So maybe a pension fund, this is the firm that they use to manage the investment. They use a private equity firm. So they use these investments to make money for these people. And so a lot of times in the growth section, the growth equity private equity firms, they are focused on buying businesses that already show that they have a place out in the world. Like people know them, they're recognized, they're somebody that people would easily approach in the store. Those are the people that they're looking for because that's the one that's going to give them the fastest return on the investments. And a lot of times these places, if they buy the whole thing outright, a lot of times they're taking it, doing all these changes internally just so they can flip it. They want to sell that business again at a higher cost, obviously, to make the money. Now, part where people get upset is in that middle part. In the cases of a lot of beauty and maybe food things that we see all the time. But sidebar, right now, I was reading, and I will leave the list to what I was reading below, that private equity firms are actually looking to go into tradesmen's kinds of things. So they're looking for like big things, HVAC, plumbing kind of stuff, big companies in those, and investing into that market because of how they said lucrative it is, basically, and how kind of essential and how it's a longevity kind of thing because it's always going to be essential. You're always going to need an electrician. You're always going to need a plumber, those kinds of things. So they're looking to invest into that stuff. But in the beauty realm, they did say they were looking into more derma-backed, clean beauty, science-backed products, brands, I should say, to invest in. So that's like the wave for where private equity firms are looking now. Venture capital firms are a type of private equity firm, but that's mostly used by wealthy individuals who want to invest, who want a portfolio of things to invest in. So that's why you see a lot of private equity firms owning a lot of stuff across the board, not brand-wise, but brand-wise and item-wise. So like they'll be in beauty, they'll be in healthcare, they'll be in electric water companies, stuff like that. Private equity firms, they're the ones that I'm going to focus on are the ones that focus on growth equity. There's different types of private equity firms. And so, because, everyone has a different focus. But the one I want to talk about is growth equity. And that is the one that's the hot button topic. That's the one everyone's talking about. That's the kind of private equity people are upset at, because their main goal is to come in. They go in and look for businesses that are already well established, up and running. They might be in all your favorite stores. That's why you know them. And they're probably out for a while. And it's the one we're most familiar with, because they come in and they buy that company every time your favorite companies are for sale. Like, I'll use beauty for the biggest example, because that one is really sensitive because of the nature of the beauty companies that keep getting bought up. And it's a lot of minority owned, especially black women owned businesses get bought up, and then everything about it changes. And that's why people get upset. And the whole reason why it changes is in the nature of the growth equity private equity firm. The whole point is to come in, they get a stake depending on whatever deal they've made. These are like private deals, they're private companies. If they buy a public company, they usually make it private again, because they're going to be doing some restructuring. They come in, they buy a company or buy stake in the company. And by stake, I mean they buy a piece of ownership of the company. That way they can come in, and basically their whole role is to inject it with money, new management, leadership, and operations. That's why people are so ready to, get bought by private equity, because maybe they were expanding and they realized they didn't have enough capital. So they kind of trade capital for a little bit of say-so in how you're going to run this business, because they need their investment back, right? And part of getting that investment back is having that ownership, so that they'll keep getting paid, or eventually flip the whole company and sell it to somebody else. But in order to flip the company into something very profitable and beyond profitable, so that it's attractive for sale by somebody else, is they come in and they usually restructure everything about it, operations. And what we've seen, unfortunately, when it comes to things like food and beauty products, we see what the people consider a decline in quality of the product, or a redirection of the marketing of the product. And we see a lot of erasure of what made us like the company to begin with. We, the customer, start to feel like things aren't the same quality, the formulations are different, the reactions are different, the taste is different, whatever the product is. And it's usually because there probably are some things that got changed, especially when it comes to the shifting of management. And that's where I believe the owners aren't always told exactly how much power and control they're giving up on the day-to-day decisions and the operational decisions that are happening within their company. I feel like they're getting preyed on, but that's like a whole nother topic. When they're making these management shifts and demoting people from owner to like a trustee on the board or whatever, it's kind of like a title change. I don't really feel like they have much say in what's happening, because the company that owns them is now doing what's best for them, and that is their bottom line. And so operations changes, how they make stuff changes, ingredients are going to change, simply because maybe one thing is more expensive than another thing, or they already have a deal with a different vendor, and that's the vendor they're going to use instead of the vendor that the original person was using. So things change in that way a lot. Quality changes, and I think it disproportionately affects things by people of color, because of the predatory nature of private equity firm when it comes to these spaces. I feel like it's not talked about that they're literally banking on the fact that they can't go get these traditional loans because of structural racism and structural misogyny and the patriarchy. Yeah, we see a lot of products suddenly change demographic. And it's mainly because now the private equity firm that owns them wants to broaden their appeal. And that just means they want to bring more eyes to it that they want, so that they can have more money coming in. So that as they push down that operations, as they push down costs, they get revenue up. And so now the ratio becomes more favorable for, back to, as I said, the sell-off that's eventually going to happen. I just remembered the other type of equity firm. There's the startup kind of equity. I forgot what the real title is, but the one I told you is kind of basically what venture capitalists kind of thing. There's the growth equity, the one that I'm talking about right now, and then there's a leverage equity, private equity, and basically they use the business as their collateral, and they use that debt to get a loan to buy that company and then sell off pieces of it or whatever, or maybe just say their first revenues and stuff. They use the revenue that start coming in as the money to pay back that debt, and then they have the company. So those are different types. These are the official names. Let me put it here. Those are the official types of private equities. But yeah, so that's basically private equity, and that's kind of where that soft spot is and why people kind of get irritated with seeing that somebody was bought out. Like I just saw, they keep talking about Pat McGrath Labs. That's not new. But they also talk about Fenty Beauty, and I got scared. I was like, oh no, Lord, they got Rihanna. Unfortunately, we might see a sale of Fenty Beauty soon. If we haven't seen it already, I don't think it's sold yet. Like, I know they're talking about it though, but whatever. They said they've already sold Mented. They've sold Beauty Bakery. These are just beauty things because those are the things I'm interested in. But there's other things that they mentioned in these articles. When I looked up, like, what's the new thing that private equities are looking for, I was just really interested. I just wanted to see, like, what are they searching for? What are they trying to get their hands on right now? And so that's how I found those two articles. So if you're also wondering what they're trying to get their hands on, I will link those articles below. Thing I mentioned earlier that I almost forgot. A lot of times, people prefer, wealthier people and certain firms, they prefer private equity firms simply because of that private part. There's a lot of things they don't have to disclose like a publicly traded company does. But now a lot has changed thanks to the, rules. Things like, you know what I'm going to say, the CFPB. That's right. They're all frozen, but whatever. Because of bureaus like that and the investigations that they do, there are certain things that private equity firms do have to disclose now. I believe they do have to register their management with them. Before they didn't have to do any of that. And I think they have to register what kinds of things they're buying and like in the quantities and stuff. They don't have to disclose as much as a publicly traded company does. And that is, again, part of the reason why I think wealthier people like to invest in them, because they also don't have to, I think, dox their investors all the time. That I'm not sure. I am speaking outside of my neck, so but I don't think they have to disclose that part, and that's probably why people like it the most. But yeah, so that's private equity. That's a quick little scoop on private equities. I hope that helped you guys. I hope that helped you understand why people are so upset when they hear that another private company has bought one of their favorite companies, because things will undoubtedly change. And like I said, it's not always for what the consumer feels is the best, but it is usually what the business feels is the best, unfortunately. And I think another big problem is the scaling too fast. A lot of businesses scale faster than I think that, who am I? But I think that they scale faster, or they want to scale faster than I think they should. I don't think people relish in the time that it takes to really grow a business steadily, so you don't have to lean on this. And then sometimes you just do need more money. That is true. But I feel like there's a leverage that you have when your business is profitable, doing well, and secure in all its different facets, and you want to just get an injection of money for like maybe a little 1% piece. I think there's a more power that you have from when you're kind of in trouble because you're in over your head and you need somebody to come help you. I think there's a difference. Going into these deals, there's always going to be a difference when you perceive that you need the deal and when you can just take the deal because it might help. Like, there's a difference, right? So I think that's another reason why a lot of these companies, and it's not just like women-owned companies or black-owned companies or whatever. It's a lot of private individuals, small businesses. They all have the same kinds of problems, and that's kind of the niche and the gotcha for the private equity firms. So thanks for watching. I've rambled up enough. I hope that made sense. If you have any questions, please leave them below. If I can answer them, I hope so. Maybe one of the articles I leave below can answer it. So, yeah. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Do you still love me or not?
I need some